The desert stretched endlessly before us, a barren expanse shimmering beneath the merciless sun. Heat waves rose from the cracked asphalt, bending the horizon into a wavering mirage that seemed to mock our progress. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional crunch of gravel beneath the tires. No birds circled overhead, no insects buzzed in the air, just emptiness pressing against the senses. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling the weight of isolation settle over me. The desert had always been unforgiving, but today it felt different, as though it were holding its breath, waiting. My companions sat quietly, each lost in thought, their faces drawn by fatigue and anticipation. Ahead, the road narrowed into nothingness, a ribbon of black cutting through a world determined to swallow us whole. Something about this silence felt wrong. The first anomaly appeared just past noon, when the sun was at its highest and the desert glowed with blinding intensity. At first, it looked like nothing more than a patch of disturbed earth, a ripple in the sand where the wind had shifted patterns. But as we slowed the vehicle and stepped out, the truth became clear. Half buried in the sand was a fragment of metal, its edges jagged and corroded, as though torn from something larger. I crouched down, brushing away the sand with my gloved hand. The fragment was thick, industrial, not the kind of scrap you'd expect to find in the middle of nowhere. Its surface bore faint markings, lines that resembled schematics or coordinates, but they were too eroded to decipher. "Looks like part of a structure," Drew muttered, his voice low. He was our geologist, accustomed to reading the language of stone, but even he seemed unsettled. Nearby, more fragments protruded from the earth, twisted rods, bolts, and what looked like the corner of a reinforced panel. The desert had tried to swallow them, but the wind betrayed their presence. "This doesn't make sense," Isabella said, her eyes scanning the horizon. "There's no record of construction out here. No settlements, no facilities." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. We were miles from any known site, deep in a stretch of desert that maps marked as empty. Yet here was evidence of something man-made, something hidden. I felt unease settle deeper into my chest. The desert was supposed to be timeless, untouched, but these fragments suggested otherwise. They whispered of secrets buried beneath the sand, of structures concealed from history. We marked the location, photographing the fragments and noting coordinates. The sun beat down mercilessly, but none of us complained. Curiosity had taken hold, stronger than discomfort. As we prepared to move on, I noticed something else. Faint depressions in the sand, circular patterns that didn't match natural erosion. They radiated outward from the fragments as though something had pressed into the earth long ago. "Tracks?" Rowan suggested, his voice uncertain. He was our archaeologist, trained to recognize patterns of human activity. But these impressions were too large, too deliberate. I shook my head. Not tracks, something else. The desert wind picked up, scattering sand across the impressions, erasing them before we could study further. It felt deliberate, as though the desert itself was trying to conceal what we had found. We climbed back into the vehicle, the silence heavier now, each of us turning over possibilities in our minds. The fragments were not random. They were part of something larger, something buried. And though none of us said it aloud, we all felt the same thought pressing against us. We were not supposed to find this. Our team was small but carefully chosen, each member selected for expertise that complemented the mission. Drew Hawkins, the geologist, had spent years studying desert formations and volcanic activity. His thick eyebrows furrowed whenever he encountered anomalies, and today they seemed permanently etched into his face. Isabella Meyer, our botanist, carried notebooks filled with sketches of desert flora. She was meticulous, her curly black hair tied back in a practical ponytail, her eyes sharp and observant. Even here, in the barren expanse, she scanned for signs of life, though the silence offered none. Rowan Watson, tall and broad-shouldered, was our archaeologist. His tools hung neatly from his belt, each one polished and organized. He had a reputation for patience, for uncovering secrets hidden in stone and soil. Yet even he seemed unsettled by the fragments we had found. Alvin Williams, the youngest of us, was a researcher with boundless enthusiasm. His bright green eyes darted constantly, eager to discover, to document. He carried his camera everywhere, snapping photos of even the smallest details. His energy was infectious, though sometimes reckless. And then there was Douglas Alvarez, our leader. His salt and pepper hair and scarred cheeks spoke of experience, of expeditions survived. He carried himself with authority, his voice steady, his commands precise. Yet today I noticed something different. A tension in his shoulders, a flicker of unease in his gaze. Finally, there was me. My role was to study ecosystems, to understand how life adapted to harsh environments. But here, in this silence, there was no life to study. Only fragments of something unnatural, something hidden. We were a diverse group, united by curiosity and driven by discovery. Yet, beneath the surface, tension simmered. Drew distrusted Douglas's secrecy. Isabella questioned the purpose of our mission. Rowan kept his thoughts guarded, while Alvin's enthusiasm sometimes clashed with caution. As we drove deeper into the desert, the fragments behind us, I felt the weight of these dynamics pressing in. We were not just a team, we were individuals with doubts, fears, and suspicions. And whatever lay ahead would test us in ways none of us could predict. The silence of the desert amplified everything. The creak of the vehicle, the rustle of clothing, the steady rhythm of breathing. It was as though the desert itself was listening, waiting for us to make the next move. Douglas finally broke the silence. We keep moving, document everything, no assumptions. His voice carried authority, but beneath it I heard something else, an edge of fear. We nodded, each of us aware that the fragments were only the beginning. Something larger waited beneath the sand, and we were heading straight toward it. The desert had always been quiet, but this silence was different. It wasn't the natural hush of an empty landscape. It was a silence that felt imposed, deliberate, as though the world itself had been muted. As we moved deeper into the barren expanse, the absence of life became undeniable. No lizards darted across rocks, no birds traced the sky, no insects buzzed in the air. Even the wind seemed hesitant, carrying only a faint whisper that vanished before reaching our ears. Isabella frowned, her eyes scanning the horizon. "This isn't normal," she murmured. "Even deserts have ecosystems. Something should be here." Her words echoed my own thoughts. I had studied countless environments, and even the harshest landscapes held signs of resilience. But here, there was nothing. The silence pressed against us, heavy and unnatural, as though the desert itself disapproved of our presence. Drew muttered under his breath, "Feels like the place is holding its breath." His voice was low, almost reverent, as if speaking too loudly might provoke something unseen. Rowan remained quiet, his gaze fixed on the horizon, while Alvin, usually restless, sat still, his enthusiasm dimmed by the oppressive atmosphere. Douglas tried to maintain composure, but I noticed the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes flicked constantly across the landscape. He was unsettled, though he tried to hide it beneath his usual authority. The air itself felt different, thicker, heavier. The heat pressed down, but beneath it was a chill, subtle yet undeniable. It was as though the desert was not just empty, but actively resisting us. We stopped briefly to rest, the silence broken only by the crunch of boots on sand. I knelt, examining the ground. The soil was disturbed, patterns etched into it that didn't match wind erosion. They were faint, almost erased, but deliberate. "Tracks again?" Rowan asked quietly. I shook my head. Not tracks, something else. The pattern seemed to pulse in the fading light, as though the desert itself was alive, watching. When we resumed, the unease grew stronger. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, the horizon wavered with distortion, and the silence deepened, swallowing even the sound of our footsteps. By the time the sun began to set, the desert felt hostile. Not in the way of heat or thirst, but in something deeper, something unseen. We were intruders, and the desert knew it. Douglas finally spoke, his voice tight. "We set camp soon. No one goes off alone." His words carried weight, but I sensed they were not just precaution, they were fear. As darkness fell, the silence became absolute. The desert was not just empty, it was waiting. We found it at dusk, when the last light of the sun painted the desert in shades of red and gold. At first, it looked like nothing more than a shadow cast by a jagged rock formation. But as we approached, the truth revealed itself. Half buried in the sand was a hatch, metal, circular, reinforced. Its surface was weathered but intact, the edges sharp against the desert floor. It was not natural. The hatch was massive, at least 10 feet across, with rivets lining its circumference. A faint seam ran through the center, suggesting it could open, though no visible handle or lock was present. The desert had tried to conceal it, but the wind had betrayed its existence. I crouched down, brushing away the sand. The metal was cold beneath my glove, unnaturally cold, as though it had been untouched by the sun's relentless heat. A chill ran through me, settling deep in my bones. "Jesus," Alvin whispered, his voice trembling with awe. "What is this doing out here?" Douglas stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He circled the hatch slowly, his boots crunching against the sand. "This isn't supposed to be here," he said finally, his tone clipped. "No records, no maps, nothing." Drew knelt beside me, examining the rivets. "Industrial, reinforced. This isn't some abandoned well or storage tank. This is military grade." Rowan's eyes narrowed. Or something worse. The silence pressed in, heavier now, as though the desert itself disapproved of our discovery. Isabella stood back, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "We shouldn't be here," she murmured. "This feels wrong." But curiosity had already taken hold. Alvin ran his fingers across the seam, searching for a way to open it. "There has to be a mechanism," he said, his voice eager, "something hidden." I felt torn. Part of me wanted to leave, to pretend we hadn't found it. But another part, the part driven by discovery, wanted to know what lay beneath. The hatch was not just a structure. It was a secret, buried in the desert, waiting to be uncovered. Douglas finally spoke, his voice firm. "We'll document it, photograph everything, but no one touches it until we understand what we're dealing with." Alvin frowned but obeyed, snapping photos from every angle. The hatch gleamed faintly in the fading light, its surface reflecting the dying sun. As darkness fell, the air grew colder. The hatch seemed to radiate that chill, a subtle hum vibrating through the metal. I pressed my ear against it, listening. At first, I heard nothing. Then, faintly, a sound, like machinery deep below, still running. I pulled back quickly, my heart pounding. "It's not dead," I whispered. "There's something alive down there." The others exchanged uneasy glances. Drew's brows furrowed deeper. Isabella's lips tightened. Rowan's jaw clenched. Alvin's eyes widened with excitement, while Douglas's expression hardened. "We'll camp here tonight," Douglas said. "Tomorrow we'll decide." No one argued, though unease hung heavy in the air. We set up tents nearby, the hatch looming like a silent sentinel. The fire crackled weakly, its light barely pushing back the darkness. I couldn't stop staring at it. The hatch seemed to pulse in the firelight, its surface alive with shadows. Every time the wind shifted, I thought I heard something. A faint clicking, a whisper, a hum. Sleep was impossible. I lay awake, listening, waiting. The desert was silent, but the hatch was not. It breathed, it hummed, it waited. Near midnight, Alvin crept from his tent, his camera slung over his shoulder. I watched him approach the hatch, his movements cautious but eager. He knelt, pressing his ear against the metal, just as I had. His eyes widened and he began snapping photos furiously. "Alvin," I hissed, stepping out of my tent, "get back." He ignored me, tracing the seam with his fingers. Then, suddenly, a sound, a deep, resonant thud from beneath the hatch. The ground trembled, faint but undeniable. Alvin stumbled back, his face pale. The others rushed out, drawn by the noise. Douglas's eyes blazed with anger. "I said no one touches it," he barked. Alvin stammered, I didn't, I just..." But the damage was done. The hatch had responded. We stood in silence, staring at the metal surface. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the ground, through our bones. The desert seemed to recoil, the air thick with tension. Douglas finally spoke, his voice low. "Tomorrow, we open it." No one protested. The decision had already been made. The hatch was not just a discovery, it was an invitation, and we had accepted. The morning sun had barely risen when Douglas gave the order. We gathered around the hatch, its cold metal surface gleaming faintly beneath the desert light. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of our tools scraping against the seam. It resisted at first, as though reluctant to yield its secrets. Then, with a grinding shriek, the hatch shifted, dust billowing into the air. A rush of cold air escaped, unnatural against the desert heat, carrying with it the faint scent of rust and something older, something buried. My heart pounded as the hatch lifted, revealing a yawning darkness below. A ladder descended into the void, vanishing into shadows that seemed endless. We stood at the edge, staring down, each of us caught between fear and curiosity. The desert had concealed this place for decades, maybe longer. Now it had chosen to reveal it. The ladder descended into darkness, its rungs slick with age and coated in a thin film of dust. I gripped the sides tightly, the metal biting cold against my gloves, and began the slow descent. Each step echoed faintly, reverberating through the shaft like whispers that refused to fade. The air grew colder the deeper I went, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and machinery long forgotten. Above me, Alvin followed eagerly, his camera slung across his chest, snapping photos even as he climbed. His enthusiasm was undimmed, though I could see the tremor in his hands. Below, Douglas's voice carried upward, steady and commanding. Slowly, one at a time, no mistakes. The shaft was narrow, claustrophobic. Shadows pressed in from all sides, the beam of my flashlight barely cutting through the void. I tried to focus on the rhythm of my movements. Step, breathe, step. But unease gnawed at me. Halfway down, I paused, shining my light against the walls. They were lined with metal panels, etched with markings I couldn't decipher. Strange symbols, geometric patterns, worn by time but still visible. They seemed to pulse faintly in the light, as though alive. "See that?" Alvin whispered above me. His voice trembled with awe. I nodded, though I didn't trust myself to speak. The descent continued, each rung taking us deeper into the unknown. The silence was broken only by the creak of the ladder and the faint hum that seemed to rise from below. It wasn't mechanical, not exactly. It was something else, something organic, resonating through the shaft like a heartbeat. By the time my boots touched solid ground, my legs ached, my breath shallow. The chamber stretched out before me, vast and shadowed, the ladder disappearing into the ceiling above. One by one, the others joined me, their flashlights cutting arcs of light through the darkness. Douglas surveyed the chamber, his expression unreadable. "Stay close," he ordered. "No one wanders." The ladder loomed behind us, a fragile link to the surface. Ahead, the darkness waited, patient and unyielding. The chamber opened before us like a tomb, vast and silent, its air heavy with the scent of rust and decay. Dust coated every surface, thick enough to mute the colors of metal and stone. Our flashlights swept across abandoned equipment. Consoles shattered, chairs overturned, papers scattered like remnants of a hurried departure. It was clear that people had once worked here, but the place had been left to rot for decades. I knelt beside a console, brushing away layers of grime. The screen was cracked, wires protruding like veins from its frame. A faded label read Sector 1, though its meaning was lost to time. Rowan crouched nearby, examining brittle papers. "These are reports," he murmured. "Logs, but the dates, they don't make sense. They reference years that don't exist." Isabella picked up a notebook, her hands trembling. Entries stop abruptly. No conclusion, no explanation. Her voice was hushed, as though afraid to disturb whatever lingered here. Alvin snapped photos furiously, his excitement undimmed. "This is incredible," he whispered. "Proof of something hidden." His enthusiasm clashed with the oppressive silence, making it feel almost sacrilegious. But unease gnawed at me. The chamber felt abandoned, yet not empty. Shadows clung to corners, shifting when the light moved. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum that seemed to emanate from deeper within the bunker. Douglas's voice cut through the tension. "Document everything, then we move." His tone was firm, but I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. We spread out, each of us examining fragments of the past. Drew studied the walls, noting the construction. "This isn't standard," he said quietly. "Reinforced beyond necessity. Whatever they built here, they wanted it to last." I felt the weight of history pressing in. This place had been alive once, bustling with activity. Now it was a mausoleum, its secrets buried beneath dust and silence. As we regrouped, I noticed something etched into the floor, a symbol, circular and intricate. It pulsed faintly in the light, mocking us with its presence. "We're not alone," I whispered, though I didn't know why. The chamber seemed to listen, its silence deepening, pressing against us like a warning. We had barely finished documenting the chamber when the lights flickered. At first, it was faint, a single bulb sputtering to life, casting a weak glow that seemed more like a dying breath than illumination. Then, one by one, the bulbs lining the ceiling awakened, their sterile light flooding the chamber in a harsh, unnatural glow. Shadows retreated reluctantly, clinging to corners as though unwilling to surrender. We froze, staring upward. The silence was broken by the faint buzz of electricity, a sound that should have been impossible. This place had been abandoned for decades, yet the lights burned as if they had never gone out. "This shouldn't be possible," Drew muttered, his voice tight. "There's no power source, not after all this time." Isabella's face paled. "Then what's keeping them alive?" she whispered. Her words carried the weight of dread, as though speaking them aloud might invite an answer. Douglas remained calm, though I saw the tension in his jaw. "Stay focused. Lights don't change the mission," he said, but his eyes betrayed unease. The hum grew louder, resonating through the walls, through our bones. It wasn't mechanical, not entirely. It felt organic, alive, as though the bunker itself was breathing. Alvin raised his camera, snapping photos furiously. "This is proof," he whispered. "Something's still running." His excitement clashed with the oppressive atmosphere, making the moment feel surreal. I scanned the walls, noticing the symbols etched into the panels glowing faintly now, their patterns shifting in rhythm with the hum. They pulsed like veins, alive with energy. Rowan approached one of the consoles, brushing away dust. The screen flickered, static dancing across its surface. For a moment, words appeared, fragmented, distorted, unreadable. Then it vanished, leaving only silence. "This place isn't dead," I whispered. "It's waiting." The lights buzzed overhead, their glow relentless. Shadows twisted unnaturally, bending in ways that defied logic. The hum pressed against us, demanding attention, demanding submission. Douglas finally spoke, his voice steady but low. "We moved deeper. Stay close." No one argued. The chamber had awakened, and we were its witnesses. The corridor beyond the chamber stretched longer than expected, its walls narrowing into a passage that seemed to pulse faintly with the same hum we had heard before. Our flashlights cut through the gloom, revealing dust motes suspended in the air like fragments of time itself. At the end of the corridor, a heavy door stood ajar, its hinges rusted but functional. Douglas pushed it open, and we stepped into a room that immediately stole our breath. Maps covered the walls, pinned in neat rows, their paper yellowed but intact. At first glance, they resembled standard topographical charts, mountains, rivers, deserts. But as we studied them, the truth became clear. These were not maps of places we recognized. One chart depicted a desert, but its landmarks were wrong. Rivers flowed where none existed. Mountains rose where the land was flat. Another map showed cities, their names unfamiliar, their layouts impossible. Rowan's voice trembled. These places don't exist. Isabella traced a finger across one map, her brow furrowed. Or they don't exist yet. The room was vast, its walls covered in these impossible charts. At the center stood a table, covered in notebooks and files. I opened one, my hands trembling. Inside were rules, written in neat script. Do not enter alone. Do not speak to the voices. Do not trust the maps. Do not open the lower doors. Document everything. The rules were simple yet ominous. Each carried weight, a warning of dangers unseen. Alvin snapped photos, his excitement undimmed. "This is incredible," he whispered. "Evidence of something beyond comprehension." But unease gnawed at me. The maps seemed to shift when I looked away, their lines rearranging, their landmarks changing. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but the distortion remained. Drew studied the walls, his voice low. "These aren't just maps, they're predictions, possibilities." Douglas's face was pale, his composure slipping. "We document, then we leave." But leaving felt impossible. The room demanded attention, its secrets pressing against us. As we worked, the hum grew louder, resonating through the maps, through the floor. The lights flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Then, faintly, a voice. Not human, not mechanical. A whisper rising from the maps themselves. "Do not trust the maps." We froze, staring at the walls. The words echoed, fading into silence. Alvin's hands shook as he lowered his camera. "Did you hear that?" No one answered. The room had spoken, and we were its witnesses. The maps shifted again, their lines rearranging, their landmarks changing. One chart now depicted our location, the desert above, the hatch marked clearly. Beneath it, corridors stretched endlessly, deeper than we had imagined. Rowan's voice trembled. "It knows we're here." The silence pressed in, heavier than before. The rules on the table seemed less like warnings and more like inevitabilities. Isabella clutched the notebook tightly. "We shouldn't be here," she whispered. "This place, it's alive." Douglas's jaw tightened. "We finish our work, then we leave." His voice was steady, but I saw the fear in his eyes. We moved cautiously, documenting each map, each file. The notebooks contained references to Project Continuum, a name repeated across pages, always accompanied by warnings. Some entries described experiments with time, with space, with reality itself. Others spoke of anomalies, places that existed and didn't, events that had happened and hadn't. One entry chilled me. "The maps will lie. They will show what cannot be. Do not follow them." Alvin read aloud from another file. "They were building something here. Not just a bunker. A continuum." His voice faltered, the word foreign, heavy with implication. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls, through the maps. The lights flickered violently, shadows twisting unnaturally. Then, another voice, louder this time, rising from the walls. "Do not open the lower doors." We froze, the words echoing through the room. The maps shifted again, their lines rearranging, their landmarks changing. One chart now depicted a door, deep within the bunker, marked with symbols we couldn't decipher. Rowan's face was pale. "It's warning us." Douglas's expression hardened. "Or it's trying to control us." The tension was unbearable. The room seemed alive, its maps breathing, its rules whispering. We were intruders, and it knew. Isabella clutched the notebook tighter, her knuckles white. "We need to leave," she whispered. But Douglas shook his head. "Not yet. We need answers." The maps pulsed, their lines shifting, their landmarks rearranging. One chart now depicted us, standing in the room, our flashlights casting arcs of light. It was impossible, yet undeniable. Alvin's voice trembled. "It's watching us." The silence pressed in, heavier than ever. The hum grew louder. The lights flickered violently, the shadows twisted unnaturally. Then, faintly, another whisper. "Document everything." We obeyed, our hands trembling, our hearts pounding. The room demanded it, and we complied. By the time we finished, the maps had shifted again, their lines rearranging, their landmarks changing. One chart now depicted the desert above, the hatch sealed, the surface empty. Beneath it, corridors stretched endlessly, deeper than we had imagined. Douglas finally spoke, his voice low. We moved deeper. No one argued. The room had spoken, and we were its witnesses. The chamber's oppressive silence weighed on us as Douglas made the call. "We'll cover more ground if we split up," he said, his voice steady but edged with unease. The decision felt dangerous, yet necessary. This place was too vast to explore together. Rowan and Isabella paired off, their flashlights sweeping toward the dormitory wing. Drew and Alvin moved toward the mess hall, Alvin's camera already clicking in anticipation. Douglas motioned for me to follow him deeper, toward corridors that seemed to breathe with the hum we had heard since entering. As we separated, the air grew heavier, the shadows thicker. Each step away from the group felt like a betrayal of safety, like tearing apart the fragile bond that had kept us sane. The silence deepened, swallowing even the sound of our footsteps. For the first time, I realized the bunker wanted us divided. It was waiting. The corridor led us into a wing that felt eerily preserved, as though time had stopped the moment its occupants vanished. Our flashlights swept across rows of metal-framed beds, each neatly made, sheets tucked with military precision. Dust coated the surfaces, but the orderliness was unsettling. Whoever had lived here had left in a hurry, yet not in chaos. Isabella moved cautiously between the beds, her fingers brushing against a pillow that crumbled at her touch. "This isn't abandonment," she whispered. "It's evacuation." Her words carried weight, the distinction chilling. Rowan crouched beside a nightstand, opening its drawer. Inside lay journals, their pages brittle but intact. He flipped through one, his brow furrowing. "Entries stop mid-sentence," he murmured. "No explanation, just silence." I scanned the room, noting personal belongings left behind. Boots lying neatly beneath bunks, uniforms folded on shelves, photographs pinned to walls. Faces stared back at us from faded images, their smiles frozen in time. Families, friends, moments of normalcy preserved in a place that now felt anything but normal. Alvin snapped photos furiously, his excitement undimmed. "This is proof," he said, his voice trembling with awe. "People lived here, they worked here, this was a community." But unease gnawed at me. The dormitories felt inhabited, not abandoned. The air carried a faint scent, not of decay, but of something recent. Soap, fabric, human presence. It was impossible, yet undeniable. Drew examined the walls, noting the construction. "Reinforced again," he muttered. "They built this to last." but why hide it? Isabella picked up another journal, her hands trembling. "Listen to this," she whispered, reading aloud. "We heard the voices again. Rules say ignore them, but they sound like us. They sound like home." The silence pressed in, heavier now. The dormitories were not just remnants of the past. They were echoes of something ongoing. Douglas's voice cut through the tension. "Document everything, then we move." His tone was firm, but I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. As we regrouped, I noticed something etched into the wall above one bed. A symbol, circular and intricate, identical to the one we had seen in the first chamber. It pulsed faintly in the light, mocking us with its presence. "We're not alone," I whispered, though I didn't know why. The dormitories seemed to listen, their silence deepening, pressing against us like a warning. The mess hall was larger than expected, its long rows of tables stretching into the shadows. Dust coated every surface, but the arrangement was disturbingly intact. Plates stacked neatly, utensils aligned, trays left as though waiting for their owners to return. Our flashlights swept across the room, illuminating details that made the silence unbearable. Drew ran his hand across one table, leaving a streak in the dust. "This place hasn't been touched in decades," he muttered. Yet his words faltered when Alvin pointed to a single tray at the far end. Unlike the others, it wasn't fossilized. The food upon it, bread, a slab of meat, a cup of water, looked fresh. Steam still rose faintly from the plate. Isabella's breath caught. "That's impossible!" We approached cautiously, the air growing colder with each step. The tray sat alone, its contents pristine, untouched by time. I leaned closer, inhaling. The scent was unmistakable. Warm bread, cooked meat. It was real. Rowan's voice trembled. "Someone's been here, recently." The silence pressed in, heavier now. The mess hall felt inhabited, not abandoned. Shadows clung to corners, shifting when our lights moved. The hum we had heard before resonated faintly, vibrating through the floor. Douglas's jaw tightened. "Document it. Don't touch." His voice was firm, but I saw the fear in his eyes. Alvin snapped photos furiously, his excitement undimmed. "This is proof," he whispered. "This place isn't dead." But unease gnawed at me. The mess hall was too perfect, too preserved. The fresh tray felt deliberate, a message left for us. Isabella clutched her notebook tightly. "It's bait," she whispered. "It wants us to know we're not alone." The silence deepened, pressing against us like a warning. The mess hall was not just a relic of the past, it was alive, waiting. The laboratory was unlike any other room we had seen so far. The air was colder here, heavy with the scent of chemicals long evaporated, yet still lingering like ghosts. Our flashlights swept across rows of shelves lined with glass jars, each containing specimens that defied explanation. Some were plants twisted into unnatural forms, their stems knotted like muscle. Others were animals, or what had once been animals, mutated beyond recognition. Eyes where none should be, limbs fused together, organs suspended in cloudy liquid. Isabella recoiled, her hand covering her mouth. "These aren't natural adaptations," she whispered. "They're forced." Rowan leaned closer to one jar, his brow furrowed. "Experiments," he said grimly. "Adaptation experiments." His voice carried the weight of accusation, as though the room itself was guilty. On a central table lay notebooks, their pages filled with sketches and notes. Diagrams of anatomy, lists of variables, references to subject A and subject B. The handwriting was precise, clinical, detached. One entry read, "Specimen survived exposure for 72 hours. Mutation stable. Recommend further trials." Alvin snapped photos furiously, his excitement undimmed. "This is proof," he whispered. "They were doing something here, something incredible." His enthusiasm clashed with the horror of the room, making the moment feel surreal. Drew examined the walls, noting the reinforced construction. "They built this to contain something," he muttered, "not just to study it." The silence pressed in, heavier now. The lab felt alive, its specimens watching us from their jars, their distorted forms mocking our presence. Shadows clung to corners, shifting when our lights moved. Douglas's jaw tightened. "Document everything. Don't touch." His voice was firm, but I saw the fear in his eyes. Isabella flipped through another notebook, her hands trembling. "Listen to this," she whispered. "Adaptation successful. Subject displays resilience to environmental extremes. Potential application, survival beyond continuum thresholds." The words chilled me. This wasn't just science, it was preparation. They had been building something, shaping life to endure conditions we couldn't imagine. Rowan's voice was low, almost reverent. They weren't just studying the desert, they were preparing for something else. The hum we had heard before resonated faintly, vibrating through the floor, through the jars. The specimens seemed to pulse in rhythm, their distorted forms alive with energy. The corridor narrowed as we pressed forward, the hum growing louder, vibrating through the walls like a pulse. Our flashlights revealed another door, heavier than the rest, its surface scarred with scratches that looked deliberate, as though someone or something had tried to claw its way out. Douglas hesitated only briefly before forcing it open. The room beyond was vast, filled with rows of consoles, monitors, and machinery that should have been long dead. Yet the screens glowed faintly, their light casting an eerie pallor across the chamber. Dust lay thick on the keyboards, but the machines hummed with life, their fans spinning, their lights blinking. "This isn't possible," Drew muttered, his voice tight. "Power doesn't last decades, not without maintenance." Isabella's eyes widened as she scanned the consoles. "Then something's maintaining it," she whispered. We moved cautiously, our flashlights sweeping across the room. The control panels were covered in files, notebooks, and loose sheets of paper. Alvin rushed forward, snapping photos furiously, his excitement undimmed. "This is it," he whispered, "the heart of the bunker." Rowan picked up a file, his brow furrowing as he read. "Project Continuum," he murmured. "It's everywhere. Every log, every note." The words chilled me. Continuum. The name carried weight, heavy with implication. I opened another notebook, my hands trembling. Inside were logs written in precise script. Day 142. System stable. Continuum parameters holding. Warning issued. Do not open doors beyond Sector 5. Day 198. Voices increasing. Rules reinforced. Do not engage. Day 243. Reactor stable. Continuum expanding. Maps updated. The entries continued, each one more unsettling than the last. They spoke of experiments, of anomalies, of rules that had to be obeyed. Isabella clutched a file tightly, her knuckles white. "Listen to this," she whispered. "Continuum breach imminent. Reinforce protocols. Do not allow surface contact." The silence pressed in, heavier now. The control room was not just a place of monitoring, it was a place of warning. Douglas's jaw tightened. "Document everything. Don't touch the systems." His voice was firm, but I saw the fear in his eyes. Alvin ignored him, leaning closer to one of the consoles. The screen flickered, static dancing across its surface. For a moment, words appeared, fragmented, distorted. "Do not open the doors." Then it vanished, leaving only silence. Rowan's voice trembled. "It's still running. The system knows we're here." The hum grew louder, resonating through the floor, through our bones. The lights flickered violently, shadows twisting unnaturally. I felt unease settle deeper into my chest. The control room was not just alive, it was aware. We spread out, each of us examining fragments of the past. Drew studied the machinery, noting its construction. "This isn't standard," he muttered. "It's advanced, beyond anything we know." Isabella flipped through another notebook, her hands trembling. "Listen to this," she whispered. "Continuum expansion successful. Parameters stable. Warning, do not open lower doors. Reactor output increasing." The words chilled me. This wasn't just science, it was containment. They had built something here, something dangerous, and they were trying to control it. Alvin snapped photos furiously, his excitement undimmed. "This is proof," he whispered. "They were doing something incredible." But unease gnawed at me. The control room felt inhabited, not abandoned. The machines hummed with life. The screens flickered with warnings. The logs spoke of dangers unseen. Douglas's voice cut through the tension. "We move deeper. Stay close." His tone was firm, but I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. The silence pressed in, heavier now. The control room was not just a relic of the past, it was a warning of the future. As we regrouped, I noticed something etched into the wall above one console, a symbol, circular and intricate, identical to the ones we had seen before. It pulsed faintly in the light, mocking us with its presence. "We're not alone," I whispered, though I didn't know why. The control room seemed to listen, its silence deepening, pressing against us like a warning. It began without warning. A piercing siren shattered the silence, its shrill cry reverberating through the bunker's walls. Red lights flickered violently overhead, bathing the corridors in a blood-hued glow that pulsed in rhythm with the alarm. We froze, hearts pounding, the sound pressing against our ears until it felt unbearable. Douglas barked orders, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. "Stay together, don't panic." But panic was already creeping in, gnawing at the edges of our composure. The siren had no source we could identify, no console triggered, no switch flipped. It was as though the bunker itself had decided to awaken, announcing our intrusion with fury. Shadows twisted in the crimson light, stretching across the walls like grasping hands. I felt the weight of the alarm, not just in sound, but in meaning. It wasn't a malfunction. It was a warning. We had crossed a line. The sirens had barely faded when the intercom crackled to life. At first, it was only static, harsh, grating, filling the corridors with a metallic hiss. Then, slowly, words began to form, distorted and broken, as though dragged through layers of interference. "Not safe. "Leave. We are watching." We froze, staring upward at the speakers embedded in the ceiling. The voices were human, yet wrong. Their cadence was fractured, their tones warped, as though spoken by mouths that no longer remembered how to shape words. Alvin's eyes widened. "Did you hear that? They're speaking to us!" His voice trembled with excitement and fear. Douglas's jaw tightened. "Ignore it. Keep moving." But his command carried no conviction. The intercom crackled again, louder this time. A chorus of voices overlapped, some pleading, some commanding, some whispering. The distortion made them almost unbearable, yet fragments broke through clearly. "Do not open the doors. Follow the rules. Stay together." Isabella clutched her notebook tightly, her knuckles white. "They know the rules," she whispered. "They're repeating them." Rowan's face was pale. "But whose voices are these? They sound familiar." I listened closely, my heart pounding. He was right. Beneath the distortion, I recognized tones, inflections. One voice sounded like my own father, another like a colleague long dead. The realization chilled me to the core. "They sound like us," I whispered. The silence that followed was heavier than the alarm. The bunker wasn't just speaking, it was mimicking. The intercom crackled again, this time with laughter, not joyous, but hollow, mocking. It echoed through the corridors, bouncing off the walls until it felt as though the bunker itself was laughing at us. Alvin raised his camera, snapping photos of the speakers. "This is proof," he whispered. "Voices, warnings, rules, it's all connected." But unease gnawed at me. The voices weren't just warnings, they were manipulations. They wanted us to obey, to follow, to submit. Douglas's voice cut through the tension. "We keep moving. No one listens to the voices." His tone was firm, but I saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. The intercom crackled one final time, a single phrase breaking through clearly. "We are not done." The words echoed, fading into silence. The red lights flickered overhead, the hum grew louder, and the bunker seemed to breathe. We stood frozen, hearts pounding, the weight of the voices pressing against us. The bunker wasn't just alive, it was aware, and it was speaking directly to us. The alarm had faded, but its echo lingered in our bones. We pressed deeper into the bunker, the red lights flickering overhead, when Rowan spotted a notebook lying on a console. Its cover was worn, edges frayed, but the pages inside were intact. He opened it carefully, his flashlight sweeping across the words written in hurried script. "These are rules," he murmured. His voice carried unease, as though reading them aloud might summon whatever enforced them. The entries were numbered, each one stark and absolute. "Do not enter alone. Do not speak to the voices. Do not trust the maps. Do not open the lower doors. Document everything." We exchanged uneasy glances. The rules matched the warnings we had already encountered. The voices, the maps, the doors. It was as though the bunker itself had codified its dangers, leaving instructions for those who dared to enter. Isabella's hands trembled as she traced the ink. Someone wrote these knowing what would happen. They were trying to survive. Alvin snapped photos furiously, his excitement undimmed. "This is incredible," he whispered. "Proof of continuity, proof of intelligence." But unease gnawed at me. The rules weren't just warnings, they were inevitabilities. Each one carried weight, a consequence waiting to be triggered. Rowan's face paled as he flipped to the next page. A single line was scrawled across it, jagged and desperate. One rule already broken. The silence pressed in, heavier now. We stared at the words, the implication chilling. "Which one?" Drew asked quietly, his voice barely audible. Isabella's eyes widened. "We split up," she whispered. "Rule 1, do not enter alone." The realization hit us like a blow. We had already broken the first rule, and the consequences were unknown. Douglas's jaw tightened, his composure slipping. We regroup immediately. His voice was firm, but I saw the fear in his eyes. The notebook trembled in Rowan's hands. They knew, whoever wrote this, they knew what happens when the rules are broken. The silence deepened, pressing against us like a warning. The bunker wasn't just alive, it was enforcing its own laws. Alvin lowered his camera, his excitement dimmed. "What happens now?" he whispered. No one answered. The rules had spoken, and we were already guilty. It happened so quickly that none of us could process it. One moment, Rowan was beside us, his flashlight sweeping across the corridor, his voice steady as he read from the notebook. The next, the beam of his light vanished, swallowed by the shadows. "Rowan?" Isabella's voice cracked as she called out. No answer. The silence pressed in, heavier than before. Douglas barked orders, his tone sharp. "Stay together, no one moves alone." But the command came too late. Rowan was gone. We retraced our steps, flashlights cutting frantic arcs across the walls and floor. His footprints ended abruptly, as though erased. No sign of struggle, no sound of retreat. It was as if the bunker itself had claimed him. Alvin's hand shook as he lowered his camera. "He was right here," he whispered. "I saw him. He didn't move. He just disappeared." The hum grew louder, resonating through the walls, through our bones. Shadows twisted unnaturally, bending in ways that defied logic. The bunker wasn't just alive, it was hungry. Isabella clutched the notebook tightly, her knuckles white. "The rules," she whispered. "We broke them. This is the consequence." Drew's face was pale, his composure slipping. "It's enforcing them," he said. "Rowan broke the rule. He was alone, even for a moment, and now he's gone." The silence deepened, pressing against us like a warning. The disappearance wasn't random, it was deliberate. The bunker had chosen. Douglas's jaw tightened, his voice low. "We keep moving. No one separates again." His tone was firm, but I saw the fear in his eyes. We regrouped, our flashlights sweeping across the corridor, searching for any sign of Rowan. But there was nothing. No trace, no evidence, no explanation. He had been erased, as though he had never existed. Alvin's voice trembled. "What happens if we break another rule?" No one answered. The silence was unbearable, the weight of Rowan's absence pressing against us. The bunker wasn't just alive, it was enforcing its own laws, and we were trapped within them. The corridor sloped downward, the hum intensifying with each step. At the end stood a set of massive steel doors, taller than any we had seen, their surfaces etched with the same circular symbols that had haunted us since entering. Unlike the other doors, these were sealed completely, no rust eating at their hinges, no cracks to suggest weakness. They looked untouched, preserved, as though waiting. Douglas halted, his flashlight sweeping across the symbols. "These are the lower doors," he said quietly. His voice carried weight, the recognition chilling. Isabella clutched the notebook tightly, flipping to the page with the rules. "Do not open the lower doors," she whispered. Her voice trembled, the words heavy with dread. Alvin raised his camera, snapping photos furiously. "This is proof," he whispered. "The rules warned us, and here they are." His excitement clashed with the oppressive silence, making the moment feel surreal. Drew examined the construction, his brow furrowed. Reinforced beyond anything else we've seen. Whatever's behind them, they wanted it contained. The hum grew louder, resonating through the doors, through our bones. Shadows twisted unnaturally, bending in ways that defied logic. The bunker wasn't just alive, it was guarding something. Rowan's absence weighed heavily on us, his disappearance a reminder of the rules already broken. The doors seemed to mock us, daring us to defy them again. Isabella's voice cracked. "We can't open them. We shouldn't even be here." Douglas's jaw tightened, his composure slipping. "We document, then we move." His tone was firm, but I saw the fear in his eyes. I stepped closer, my flashlight sweeping across the symbols. They pulsed faintly, alive with energy, mocking our presence. The silence pressed in, heavier now, as though the bunker itself was holding its breath. Alvin lowered his camera, his excitement dimmed. "What happens if we open them?" he whispered. No one answered. The rules had spoken, and the doors stood as their ultimate test. The hum grew louder, the symbols pulsed brighter, the silence deepened. The lower doors were not just barriers, they were warnings. And we were standing at the edge of something we could not comprehend. The corridor narrowed into a steep descent, the hum intensifying until it felt like a living heartbeat beneath our feet. At the end, a massive chamber opened before us, dominated by a towering structure of steel and glass, the reactor. Its core glowed faintly, a pulsating light that shifted between colors, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Drew's breath caught. "This isn't nuclear," he whispered. "It's something else, something I don't recognize." The machinery surrounding the core was ancient yet alive, humming with energy that defied explanation. Consoles blinked with unreadable data, their screens filled with symbols we had seen etched into walls and floors. The glow from the reactor seemed to respond to our presence, pulsing faster as we approached. Isabella clutched her notebook tightly, flipping to the rules. "Do not open the lower doors," she read aloud, her voice trembling. "This is why. The reactor, it's connected." Alvin snapped photos furiously, his excitement undimmed. "This is proof," he whispered. "They built something beyond science, beyond us." But unease gnawed at me. The reactor wasn't just a machine, it was alive. Its glow pulsed in rhythm with the hum, its energy pressing against us like a presence. Douglas's jaw tightened, his composure slipping. "Document everything. Don't touch." His voice was firm, but I saw the fear in his eyes. Rowan's absence weighed heavily on us, his disappearance a reminder of the rules already broken. The reactor seemed to mock us, daring us to defy them again. The silence pressed in, heavier now. Shadows twisted unnaturally, bending in ways that defied logic. The reactor wasn't just alive, it was aware. Isabella's voice cracked. "We shouldn't be here. This isn't meant for us." The glow intensified. The hum grew louder, and the reactor pulsed violently, as though responding to her words. Alvin lowered his camera, his excitement dimmed. "What happens if it fails?" he whispered. No one answered. The reactor loomed before us, a living heart of the bunker, its energy pressing against us, demanding attention. The reactor's hum had grown unbearable, vibrating through the walls until it felt like the bunker itself was shaking. Then, without warning, the floor trembled violently. Dust cascaded from the ceiling, consoles rattled, and the glow from the reactor pulsed erratically, shifting from steady rhythm to chaotic bursts of light. "Hold on," Douglas shouted, bracing himself against a console. The rest of us staggered, struggling to keep our footing as the chamber convulsed. A deafening crack split the air. One of the walls buckled, metal groaning under pressure, and a fissure tore across the floor. The maps we had documented earlier flashed in my mind, the warnings, the rules, the inevitabilities. We had broken them, and now the bunker was responding. Isabella screamed as part of the ceiling collapsed, sending debris crashing onto the floor. Alvin dropped his camera, his hands trembling. "It's falling apart," he cried. The reactor pulsed violently, its glow blinding. Shadows twisted unnaturally, stretching across the walls like living things. The hum became a roar, pressing against us, demanding submission. Drew's voice was tight, panicked. "It's breaching, the containment's failing." Douglas's jaw clenched, his composure slipping. "We need to move, now." We scrambled toward the corridor, the floor splitting beneath our feet. The walls groaned, the ceiling cracked, and the bunker seemed to collapse inward, as though consuming itself. I glanced back at the reactor one last time. Its glow was no longer contained. It spilled outward, flooding the chamber with light that felt alive, predatory. The silence was gone, replaced by chaos. The bunker wasn't just alive, it was dying, and it wanted to take us with it. The corridor shook violently as the bunker collapsed around us. Dust filled the air, choking our lungs, while the reactor's glow pulsed brighter, spilling into every corner like a living fire. The hum had become a roar, deafening, pressing against us with the weight of inevitability. Douglas led the charge, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Move, now!" We stumbled forward, flashlights swinging wildly, beams fractured by falling debris. The walls groaned, fissures splitting across the floor, threatening to swallow us whole. Isabella clutched the notebook tightly, her knuckles white. "The rules!" she gasped, but her words were drowned by the sirens that erupted once more, shrill and merciless. Alvin dropped his camera, his hands trembling. "It doesn't want us to leave," he cried, his voice breaking. We pushed onward, the hatch above our only hope. Each step felt heavier, the bunker resisting, its collapse deliberate, as though it sought to consume us. Shadows twisted unnaturally, stretching across the walls like grasping hands. Drew stumbled, nearly falling into a fissure, but Douglas pulled him back, his grip iron. "Stay together," he barked. "No one gets left behind." The corridor narrowed, debris blocking our path. We clawed through, desperate, lungs burning, hearts pounding. The hatch loomed above, faint light spilling through its edges. "Salvation!" Isabella's voice cracked. "We're almost there!" The roar intensified, the reactor's glow flooding the chamber behind us. The bunker was alive, aware, and furious. We reached the ladder, its rungs slick with dust and age. One by one, we climbed, our bodies trembling, our breaths shallow. The hatch creaked above, its seal resisting, as though the bunker itself refused to let us go. Douglas forced it open, light spilling in, blinding and pure. The desert air rushed down, cold and sharp, cutting through the suffocating weight of the bunker. We emerged into the night, stars scattered across the sky, the silence vast and merciful. Behind us, the hatch slammed shut, the roar fading, the hum silenced. The bunker was gone, swallowed by its own collapse. But its presence lingered, heavy in our bones, etched into our minds. We had escaped, but not unscathed. Rowan was gone, claimed by the rules. The voices still echoed in our ears, and the reactor's glow haunted our vision, a reminder of what lay beneath. The desert stretched endlessly before us, silent and indifferent. We were free, but the bunker had marked us. Its rules, its warnings, its presence, they would never leave us. The desert stretched endlessly before us, its vastness swallowing the chaos we had left behind. The night air was sharp, carrying none of the hum, none of the whispers, none of the oppressive weight of the bunker. For the first time since our descent, there was silence, true silence. We stood together, shaken, our breaths ragged. The stars above glittered indifferently, their cold light a reminder of how small we were against the enormity of what we had witnessed. Rowan's absence pressed heavily on us, a wound that silence could not heal. Isabella clutched the notebook, its rules etched into her trembling hands. Alvin stared at the horizon, his camera broken at his feet. Douglas remained still, his eyes fixed on the hatch that had sealed itself behind us. The silence was not peace, it was a warning. The bunker was gone, but its presence lingered. The desert air was sharp against our skin as we trudged back toward the vehicles, each step heavy with exhaustion and dread. The silence of the night was vast, but it did not soothe us. It pressed down instead, reminding us of what we had left behind. The bunker was gone, sealed beneath the earth, yet its presence lingered in every breath we took. Douglas walked ahead, his posture rigid, his flashlight sweeping across the sand. He said nothing, but the weight of command hung over him like a burden too heavy to bear. Isabella clutched the notebook tightly, her eyes fixed on the ground as though afraid to look at the stars above. Alvin carried his broken camera, his excitement extinguished, replaced by hollow silence. Drew followed quietly, his face pale, his steps uncertain. Rowan's absence was a wound none of us could ignore. His name hung unspoken between us, a reminder of the rules broken and the price paid. The desert stretched endlessly, indifferent to our grief. When we reached the vehicles, the engines started reluctantly, their rumble breaking the silence. Yet even as we prepared to leave, I felt the weight of the bunker pressing against us. Its rules, its warnings, its voices, they had marked us. Isabella finally spoke, her voice trembling. "We can't tell anyone, not everything. They wouldn't believe us." Douglas's jaw tightened. "We'll report what we can. The rest stays buried." His words carried finality, but I saw the fear in his eyes. Alvin shook his head, his voice hollow. "It doesn't matter. The proof is gone. The bunker erased itself." The silence returned, heavier than before. We drove into the night, the desert stretching endlessly before us, the stars cold and indifferent. But I knew the truth. The bunker was not gone. It was waiting, buried beneath the earth, alive and aware. And it had marked us. Back at the surface facility, the silence of the desert gave way to the sterile hum of fluorescent lights. We gathered around a single table, the weight of what we had seen pressing down on us. Douglas sat at the head, his expression unreadable, a blank sheet of paper before him. It was time to write the report. Isabella placed the notebook on the table, its rules etched into every page, its warnings undeniable. "We can't tell them everything," she said softly. "They won't believe us, and if they do..." Her voice trailed off, the implication clear. Alvin leaned forward, his broken camera resting beside him. "We have proof," he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "Photos, notes, enough to show something was there." Drew shook his head. "Not enough. The bunker erased itself. The reactor collapsed. All we have are fragments." Douglas finally spoke, his tone firm. "We report what we can verify. The rest stays buried." His words carried authority, but I saw the fear in his eyes. We began drafting the account. The descent, the chambers, the maps, the rules. Each detail was recorded carefully, stripped of emotion, reduced to fact. Rowan's name was included, his disappearance noted as unexplained. The voices were described as auditory anomalies. The reactor was labeled unknown energy source. But the truth, the living presence of the bunker, its awareness, its enforcement of rules, remained unwritten. Some truths were too dangerous to share. Isabella's hands trembled as she wrote. "We're lying," she whispered. "We're leaving out the most important parts." Douglas's jaw tightened. "We're protecting them. No one needs to know what waits beneath." The silence pressed in, heavier than before. The report was not just documentation. It was a shield, a way to contain the horror we had witnessed. Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. "What happens when someone else finds it?" No one answered. The bunker was gone, but not destroyed. It was waiting, buried beneath the earth, alive and aware. We finished the report, each word a compromise between truth and survival. Douglas signed it, his hand steady, his face pale. The paper was filed, locked away, destined to be read by those who would never understand. As we left the room, I felt the weight of the bunker pressing against us still. Its rules, its warnings, its voices, they had marked us. The report was complete, but the story was far from over. The report was filed, locked away in sterile archives, but the weight of it lingered. Days passed, yet none of us found peace. The silence of the desert had followed us back, heavy and unrelenting. Then, one evening, Isabella appeared at my door, her face pale, her hands trembling. She held the notebook, the same one we had carried from the bunker. "There's more," she whispered. She opened to the final page, one we hadn't noticed before. The ink was faint, as though written in haste, but the words were clear. "The rules are not confined to the bunker. They follow." The silence pressed in, heavier now. My chest tightened as I read the line again. The rules weren't warnings for that place alone. They were laws, binding us even here. Alvin joined us, his broken camera slung over his shoulder. "I've been hearing them," he said quietly. "The voices, not in the bunker, here, in the city." His eyes were hollow, his excitement gone. Drew's voice cracked. "I thought it was just echoes, but last night I heard my brother's voice. He's been dead for years." Douglas arrived last, his composure fraying. "It's spreading," he admitted. "The rules weren't meant to contain the bunker. They were meant to contain us. The silence deepened, pressing against us like a warning. The voices had followed, the rules had escaped, and the bunker's presence lingered in every shadow. Isabella's hands trembled as she closed the notebook. "We can't run," she whispered. "We can't hide. The rules are everywhere now." Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. "What happens when we break another one?" No one answered. The warning was clear. The bunker was gone, but its laws had survived, and we were bound to them. The silence we thought we had escaped did not last. It followed us into our homes, into our dreams, into the spaces we believed were safe. At first, it was subtle, a flicker of light in a hallway, a whisper at the edge of sleep. But soon, the haunting became undeniable. Isabella confessed she heard voices at night, the same distorted tones from the bunker, repeating the rules in her own father's voice. Alvin claimed his broken camera clicked on its own, capturing images of empty rooms that later revealed faint shadows, shapes that should not exist. Drew admitted he saw Rowan in reflections, mirrors, windows, even puddles, always standing just behind him, silent, watching. Douglas tried to dismiss it all, insisting we were imagining things. But his hands trembled when he spoke, and I noticed the way he avoided dark corners, as though he feared what might be waiting there. The rules had not stayed buried. They had followed us, etched into our lives. Do not enter alone. I broke that one when I walked into my kitchen at night, only to hear footsteps behind me. Do not speak to the voices. I broke that one when I whispered back, asking who they were. The silence that followed was worse than any answer. The haunting was not confined to places, it lived in us. The bunker had marked us, and now it was feeding. Shadows stretched unnaturally, voices echoed in familiar tones, and the hum returned, faint but constant, vibrating through walls, through bones. Isabella's notebook became our lifeline. She documented every occurrence, every whisper, every shadow. The pages filled quickly, each entry a reminder that the rules were not warnings, they were inevitabilities. Alvin's voice cracked one evening. "What happens when we break them all?" No one answered. The haunting was relentless, pressing against us, reminding us that escape had been an illusion. The bunker was gone, but its presence lingered, alive and aware, haunting us wherever we went. The haunting had grown relentless, but nothing prepared us for their return. It began with a faint crackle, the same static we had heard in the bunker, seeping through radios, televisions, even phones. Then the voices followed, distorted, fractured, yet unmistakably human. Do not open the doors. Follow the rules. Stay together. The words echoed in our homes, our streets, our dreams. They were no longer confined to speakers or corridors. They lived in the air itself, woven into the fabric of our reality. Isabella clutched the notebook, her hands trembling. "They followed us," she whispered. "The voices, they're everywhere now." Alvin's broken camera clicked on its own, capturing images of empty rooms. Later, faint shadows appeared in the photographs, shapes that seemed to lean closer, listening. Drew's voice cracked as he admitted, "I hear Rowan. He speaks to me at night. He tells me the rules." His eyes were hollow, haunted. Douglas tried to maintain control, but his composure frayed. "Ignore them," he ordered, though his voice trembled. "Do not engage." Yet even he flinched when the voices began to mimic his own commands, repeating them back with mocking precision. The silence we once craved was gone, replaced by a chorus of whispers that grew louder each day. They spoke in familiar tones, family, friends, colleagues long dead. The bunker had not only followed us, it had learned us. One evening, the voices shifted. No longer warnings, they became questions. Why did you leave? Why did you break the rules? Why do you resist? Isabella's breath caught. They're not just repeating, they're evolving. The hum returned, faint but constant, vibrating through walls, through bones. Shadows stretched unnaturally, bending in ways that defied logic. The voices were not echoes, they were alive, aware, and growing stronger. Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. What happens when they stop warning us? No one answered. The return of the voices was not just a haunting, it was a claim. The bunker had marked us, and now it was speaking through the world itself. The voices did not remain confined to us. Soon, others began to notice. Reports surfaced of whispers in empty rooms, distorted tones echoing through radios, televisions, even streetlights. At first, people dismissed them as interference, tricks of faulty wiring. But the pattern grew undeniable. Isabella documented every account, her notebook filling with testimonies from strangers who had never set foot near the bunker. It's spreading, she whispered, her voice trembling. The rules are everywhere now. Alvin's broken camera captured more than shadows. His photographs began to show faces, familiar, unfamiliar, sometimes impossibly distorted. They stared from the images with hollow eyes, as though aware of being seen. Drew confessed he no longer slept. Every night I hear Rowan, he said. Not just me, neighbors hear him too. He's teaching them the rules. Douglas tried to contain the panic, insisting we remain silent, but his authority faltered. The voices had escaped, and the rules were no longer ours alone. Soon, entire neighborhoods reported anomalies, doors that refused to open, maps that shifted, voices that mimicked loved ones. The rules were being enforced beyond the bunker, woven into the fabric of daily life. The silence we once craved was gone, replaced by a chorus of whispers that grew louder each day. They spoke in familiar tones, bending reality to their will. Isabella's voice cracked as she read from the notebook. The rules are not confined, they follow. The spread was relentless, pressing against us, consuming the world piece by piece. The bunker had not died, it had multiplied. Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. What happens when the whole world breaks the rules? No one answered. The spread was unstoppable, and the voices were everywhere. The spread was no longer confined to whispers and shadows. Soon, reports of disappearances began to surface, ordinary people vanishing without trace, their names erased from records, their homes left untouched as though they had never existed. The rules were being enforced beyond us, claiming victims who had never seen the bunker. Isabella documented each case, her notebook filling with frantic entries. They're breaking the rules without knowing them, she whispered, and the bunker is punishing them. Alvin's photographs revealed more than shadows now. Faces appeared, distorted, hollow-eyed, staring directly at the lens. Some matched the missing. Others were strangers, their expressions frozen in silent screams. Drew's voice cracked as he recounted a neighbor's disappearance. He went out alone, just for groceries. He never came back. His family swears he never existed. Douglas tried to maintain control, but his composure faltered. "It's escalating," he admitted. "The rules aren't warnings anymore. They're laws, and the world is breaking them." The silence pressed in, heavier than before. The voices grew louder, repeating the rules in tones that mimicked loved ones. "Do not enter alone. Do not speak to the voices. Do not open the doors." Isabella's hands trembled as she closed the notebook. "They don't even know the rules," she whispered. "They're doomed before they begin." Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. "What happens when the rules claim everyone?" No one answered. The first victims were only the beginning. The bunker had multiplied, its laws spreading, its presence consuming, and the world was unprepared. The disappearances could no longer be ignored. Authorities launched an investigation, though they had no framework to understand what was happening. Reports of missing persons multiplied, each case eerily similar. Ordinary people vanishing without trace, their names erased, their existence denied. Douglas was summoned first, his military background making him a natural point of contact. He sat before officials, his face pale, his words measured. "There are rules," he said quietly. "They are being enforced." But his testimony was dismissed as stress-induced paranoia. Isabella presented the notebook, its pages filled with warnings and documentation. Investigators examined it, but the handwriting was dismissed as hysteria, the rules labeled superstitious ramblings. Alvin offered his photographs, each one showing distorted faces, hollow-eyed figures staring from shadows. The images unsettled the room, but they were dismissed as camera malfunctions, tricks of light. Drew's voice cracked as he recounted Rowan's disappearance. "He was erased," he whispered. "The bunker claimed him." His words were met with silence, the officials unwilling to acknowledge what they could not explain. The investigation continued, but its conclusions were hollow. Reports labeled the events as mass delusion, psychological contagion, shared trauma. The disappearances were filed as unsolved, the voices dismissed as hallucinations. Yet the anomalies persisted. Doors refused to open, maps shifted, voices echoed in familiar tones. The rules were being enforced, and the victims multiplied. Isabella's hands trembled as she closed the notebook. "They don't believe us," she whispered, "but the rules don't care." Douglas's jaw tightened. "We keep documenting, even if they ignore us." The silence pressed in, heavier than before. The investigation had failed, but the truth remained undeniable. The bunker was gone, but its laws had spread, alive and aware, consuming the world piece by piece. Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. "What happens when the investigation ends, when they stop looking?" No one answered. The investigation was only the beginning. The rules were not confined to reports or testimonies. They were everywhere, and they were unstoppable. The investigation had failed, but the anomalies continued to spread. Entire neighborhoods reported doors that refused to open, maps that shifted, and voices that mimicked loved ones. Panic grew, and eventually the authorities could no longer dismiss the events as delusion. They initiated a program they called containment. Douglas was summoned again, this time not as a witness but as an advisor. His military background gave him credibility, though his eyes betrayed the fear he carried. "You cannot contain it," he warned. "The rules are not bound by walls." But his words were ignored. Teams were dispatched to affected areas, sealing off streets, evacuating families, and erecting barriers. The anomalies were treated like a contagion, quarantined behind fences and guarded by soldiers. Yet the voices seeped through, carried on radios, phones, even the wind. Isabella documented everything, her notebook filling with frantic entries. "They think they can trap it," she whispered, "but the rules aren't physical, they're everywhere." Alvin's broken camera captured images of containment zones, streets empty, houses abandoned, shadows lingering in windows. His photographs revealed faces staring back, hollow-eyed, aware of being watched. Drew's voice cracked as he recounted what he saw near one of the zones. A man tried to leave. He broke the rule. He was erased before he reached the fence. The silence pressed in, heavier than before. The containment was not protection. It was a stage. The bunker's laws were being enforced publicly now, visible to all. Douglas's jaw tightened. "They're making it worse," he said. "Every attempt to contain it only spreads it further." The voices grew louder, mocking the barriers, repeating the rules in tones that mimicked the soldiers themselves. "Do not enter alone. Do not speak to the voices. Do not open the doors." Isabella's hands trembled as she closed the notebook. "Containment isn't stopping it," she whispered. "It's feeding it." Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. "What happens when the fences fall?" No one answered. The containment was failing, and the rules were everywhere. The bunker was gone, but its presence had multiplied, alive and aware, consuming the world piece by piece. Containment had failed. The fences, the soldiers, the quarantines, none of it mattered. The rules seeped through every barrier, enforcing themselves with merciless precision. What began as isolated disappearances became widespread chaos. Cities reported mass vanishing events. Families woke to find loved ones erased, their names missing from records, their existence denied. Streets emptied overnight, entire blocks swallowed by silence. The voices grew louder, echoing through radios, televisions, even the wind, repeating the rules in tones that mimicked the missing. Douglas tried to maintain control, but his authority crumbled. "We can't fight this," he admitted, his voice hollow. "The rules are stronger than us." Isabella documented everything, her notebook filling with frantic entries. "Order is collapsing," she whispered. "The rules are rewriting reality." Alvin's photographs revealed cities fractured, shadows stretching unnaturally, faces staring from windows that should have been empty. His broken camera became a witness to the unraveling of the world. Drew's voice cracked as he recounted what he saw in his neighborhood. They broke the rules without knowing them. And now, they're gone, all of them. Governments faltered, their systems unable to withstand laws that were not human. Maps shifted, doors refused to open, voices mocked leaders in their own tones. The collapse was not just physical, it was existential. The silence pressed in, heavier than before. The rules were no longer warnings. They were inevitabilities, consuming order, erasing structure, dismantling reality piece by piece. Isabella's hands trembled as she closed the notebook. "This isn't just collapse," she whispered. "It's transformation." Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. "What happens when there's nothing left to collapse?" No one answered. The collapse of order was complete, and the world was being rewritten by laws we could not escape. The collapse of order did not end with silence. It birthed something new. Where governments faltered and societies crumbled, the rules filled the void. They were no longer whispers or warnings. They had become laws, binding and absolute. Isabella's notebook reflected the transformation. Pages once filled with frantic documentation now carried additions that none of us had written. New rules appeared overnight, scrawled in jagged ink, their meanings undeniable. Do not resist the voices. Do not alter the maps. Do not deny the erased. She stared at the words, trembling. They're writing themselves, she whispered. The rules are expanding. Alvin's broken camera confirmed it. His photographs revealed signs posted in abandoned streets, etched with the same laws. Some were painted across walls, others carved into doors. The rules were no longer confined to notebooks. They were inscribed into reality itself. Drew's voice cracked as he recounted what he saw in his neighborhood. A man denied his wife had ever existed. He vanished instantly. The rules punished him. Douglas's composure faltered. They're not just laws, he said quietly. They're rewriting existence. The silence pressed in, heavier than before. The voices grew louder, repeating the new laws in tones that mimicked leaders, teachers, even children. Do not resist the voices. Do not alter the maps. Do not deny the erased. Isabella's hands trembled as she closed the notebook. We're not documenting anymore, she whispered. We're obeying. Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. What happens when the laws replace all others? No one answered. The new laws were spreading, consuming, rewriting. The bunker was gone, but its presence had multiplied, alive and aware, enforcing rules that no human could escape. The new laws spread like wildfire, etched into walls, whispered through radios, carved into the silence itself. Obedience became instinct, but not everyone submitted. In the shadows, a movement began, small at first, fragile but growing. They called themselves the Resistance. Isabella was the first to speak of them. They're breaking the rules deliberately, she whispered, clutching her notebook. They believe defiance is survival. Alvin's broken camera captured their symbols, marks painted across abandoned buildings, jagged lines that defied the bunker's circles. His photographs revealed gatherings in ruined streets, faces hidden, voices hushed. Drew's voice cracked as he recounted what he had seen. They walk alone. They speak to the voices. They open doors. And they survive. For now. Douglas's composure faltered. They're playing with fire, he said. The rules are not warnings, they are laws. Breaking them will bring consequences. But the resistance grew bolder. They spread messages through whispers and graffiti. Do not obey. The rules are lies. The bunker is not God. The silence pressed in, heavier than before. The voices responded, louder, mocking, repeating the defiance in distorted tones. Do not obey. Do not obey. Isabella's hands trembled as she closed the notebook. They are provoking it, she whispered, and it's listening. Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. What happens when the resistance breaks every rule? No one answered. The resistance was rising, defying laws that had consumed the world. The bunker was gone, but its presence lingered, alive and aware, watching as humanity dared to resist. The resistance had grown bold, breaking the rules deliberately, mocking the voices, defying the laws that had consumed the world. For a time, it seemed they had found a way to survive. But the bunker was alive, aware, and patient, and when it struck back, it did so with fury. It began with silence, an unnatural stillness that spread across entire districts. Radios went dead, lights flickered out, and the hum returned, vibrating through walls, through bones. Then the voices followed, louder than ever, distorted and merciless. Do not resist. Do not deny. Obey. Isabella clutched her notebook, her hands trembling. It's retaliating, she whispered. The rules are punishing them. Alvin's broken camera captured the aftermath. Streets emptied overnight. Resistance symbols erased from walls, faces of defiant men and women staring hollow-eyed from shadows. His photographs revealed not survival, but annihilation. Drew's voice cracked as he recounted what he had seen. They broke the rules, they spoke to the voices, and now they're gone, entire groups erased. Douglas's composure faltered. This isn't enforcement anymore, he said quietly. It's war. The retaliation was swift and merciless. Those who defied the rules vanished, their names erased, their existence denied. Families woke to find loved ones gone, their memories rewritten, their homes untouched. The resistance had challenged the laws, and the bunker had answered. The silence pressed in, heavier than before. The voices grew louder, mocking the defiance, repeating the rules in tones that mimicked the erased themselves. Do not resist. Do not resist. Isabella's hands trembled as she closed the notebook. It's not just punishing them, she whispered. It's warning us. Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. What happens when it retaliates against all of humanity? No one answered. The retaliation had begun, and the bunker's presence lingered, alive and aware, consuming the world piece by piece. The retaliation left scars, but what followed was worse. The world began to notice the erased. They were not simply gone, they were rewritten. Families woke to find photographs altered, names missing from records, memories reshaped. It was as if those claimed by the rules had never existed at all. Isabella documented the phenomenon, her notebook filling with frantic entries. They're not just vanishing, she whispered. Reality itself is erasing them. Alvin's broken camera revealed the truth. His photographs showed gatherings where people once stood, now replaced by empty spaces. Faces blurred, bodies dissolved, leaving only shadows. In some images, the erased appeared faintly, watching from the edges, hollow-eyed and silent. Drew's voice cracked as he recounted his own horror. My brother, he's gone. But my mother swears she never had another son. She doesn't remember him. Only I do. His words trembled, his grief unbearable. Douglas's composure faltered. This isn't disappearance, he said quietly. It's annihilation. They're rewriting history. The silence pressed in, heavier than before. The voices grew louder, repeating the rules in tones that mimicked the erased themselves. Do not resist. Do not deny. Obey. Isabella's hands trembled as she closed the notebook. We're the only ones who remember, she whispered. The erased are gone, but they linger in us. Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. What happens when we're erased too? No one answered. The erased were not just victims, they were warnings. The bunker was gone, but its presence lingered, alive and aware, consuming reality piece by piece. The notebook had grown heavier, its pages no longer ours. Each night, new lines appeared, written in jagged ink that none of us dared claim. The rules had expanded, multiplied, consumed. But one evening, Isabella opened to the final page, her hands trembling, her breath shallow. There was only one sentence, stark and absolute. The last rule cannot be broken. The silence pressed in, suffocating. We stared at the words, each of us knowing instinctively that this was not a warning, it was a decree. Alvin's broken camera clicked on its own, capturing the page. Later, when he developed the image, the words glowed faintly, as though alive. "It's different," he whispered. "This one isn't like the others." Drew's voice cracked. "What does it mean? What happens if we try?" His eyes were hollow, haunted by Rowan's absence, by the erased faces that lingered in his reflections. Douglas's composure faltered. "It means the end," he said quietly. "The last rule is final. Whatever it is, it will claim everything." The voices returned, louder than ever, repeating the decree in tones that mimicked us. "The last rule cannot be broken. The last rule cannot be broken." Isabella clutched the notebook, her knuckles white. "We don't even know what it is," she whispered. "How do we obey something undefined?" The silence deepened, pressing against us, vibrating through walls, through bones. Shadows stretched unnaturally, bending in ways that defied logic. The hum returned, constant, merciless. Alvin lowered his head, his voice hollow. "What happens when the last rule writes itself into us?" No one answered. The final decree lingered, alive and aware, consuming reality piece by piece. The bunker was gone, but its presence had multiplied, enforcing laws that no human could escape. And now, the last rule had been written.